Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation. Welcome to my kitchen and living room and dining room. Dining room. I got a dining table now. So I said on a recent show, Harm, that I moved, and that's why we're doing some in-studio shows. I'm going to get a proper home studio. Partly why I bought this place is to build a proper home studio. So I'm going to have a nice home studio soon, but that day is not today. So welcome to the kitchen. My name is Dave Woodrelli. That is Harmon Dial. This is Canucks Conversation. And of course, it is brought to you by Bet365. The Thatcher Demko extension, Harm. That's the thing I want to talk about today. And we talked about it yesterday. Jim Rutherford spoke. And look, you're really on it because you asked Demko about the extension. And I think you were the one that asked Rutherford about the extension too, right? For Demko?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're just out here giving us content, which I appreciate. I appreciate that you're going in there asking questions so that we can come up with content, because now what we have is, I think, a situation that I don't imagine a lot of people thought we'd be in, where Demko says he wants to come back. Yeah, okay. But Jim Rutherford really seems like he wants Demko back. And an extension just really seems possible. At first, when Demko said he wanted to be back, when we were talking on Friday, you and I kind of dismissed it a little bit. We were like, yeah, of course he wants to be back. What else is he going to say? But to hear what Rutherford said yesterday, like, to me, that sounded like a guy that was like, yeah, I want this guy back because, and he gave his reasons.
Yeah, and really, I think it stems from Rutherford believing that Demko, he doesn't sound as concerned about his durability and the injury risk as maybe we in the rest of the market do. He, of course, gave the example of Gary Roberts in Calgary, how the doctors told essentially everybody that he wasn't really going to be able to play again. Nobody wanted to take a chance on him. And Jim Rutherford was the one that rolled the dice on him, acquired him in Carolina, and Roberts went on to play a little while in Carolina and then a long time in Toronto. And he related that to Demko's situation because the Rutherford's hypothesis was that part of Roberts' injury problems were related to his training style, which he then adjusted, and it allowed him to stay relatively healthy throughout the rest of his career. It sounds like Rutherford really believes that Demko's previous training style was contributing to some of these injuries and durability concerns, which of course adds context to a little bit of a messy situation between the organization and Ian Clark, and the rumors of a little bit of friction when Clark stepped away.
And just to jump in for a sec here, rumors? Like, I'm pretty sure Rutherford went on the record and said, I don't think he's training the right way. I think he's working too hard in between practices and in games. I think he's working too hard in between games in practice. Like, Rutherford was on the record saying as much. So I don't think it's rumor that Jim Rutherford wasn't the biggest Ian Clark fan.
Yeah, and so because of those reasons, he doesn't seem to have as much concern. And I wonder if the Canucks look at it and go, with the cap expected to go up, if you believe Demko is going to stay healthy and you think there's a good chance that he bounces back next year, then the organization is perhaps looking at it and going, this summer's our chance to potentially sign him at a rate that would be less expensive than if he bounces back next year, has another borderline Vezina caliber season, and now has a lot more leverage closer to July 1 free agency.
Let's hear what Rutherford had to say. We already heard Demko on Friday. Maybe we'll play it. I don't think we will. Let's listen to what Rutherford had to say specifically about Demko. This was Jim Rutherford on Monday.
To stay with the organization, are you confident enough in his durability to make that type of long-term bet on him? And given all the uncertainty around his health and his play this past season, how do you even go about determining his market value in a potential contract negotiation?
Well, it's a tricky one, and there's risk to it. There will be risk on both sides if there's an extension. The thing that I really feel comfortable with is leading up to him returning to play, he had a different approach to his training, which is more of a preventive training for injuries. I almost relate it to Gary Roberts when he was in Calgary and he had the neck injury and all the doctors said he couldn't play anymore. Nobody wanted to give him a chance. I traded for him when I was in Carolina and I said, I'll take that chance. And he had a certain way of training. And I relate this to what Thatcher has started to do. And Gary went on to play. He played in Carolina for a bit and then played a long time in Toronto after that with much more serious injury than Thatcher. So I like what he's found here and what he's done. He's 100% healthy now. He's in a great frame of mind. And we would like to extend him. Now, the question is, and it's a fool's game to negotiate publicly, so I won't get into that too much. But it's going to be a matter of how much risk the team is willing to take, and then how much risk is he willing to take as to the term of that contract.
Someone in the chat, Box Van Gogh, said no BS, just tells it like he is. I love Jim Rutherford in the chat. Yeah, I mean, this is why it's so nice to hear from Jim Rutherford, because now we understand where the Canucks are coming from. And the really interesting thing about that answer, aside from him dropping a Gary Roberts trade reference to the 24-year-old reporter, which I told you yesterday, I just found absolutely hilarious while I was sitting there. It's like, as you remember, Harmon, Gary Roberts, when I made that trade. And I had to go back and look when that happened. That was late 90s. But what was really interesting to me about that answer, Harm, was there's risk on both sides, because I think Canucks fans are only looking at it, and I understand, but they're looking at it and saying that's way too risky. You can't extend him at all. Like, there's people in the chat right now saying just a Demko extension. You can't do that. You can't do it right now, but there's risk for Thatcher too. And there's risk if he doesn't sign an extension as well. And really, that's what I'd like to focus on. The cost of goaltenders is going up. We know this. Like, obviously, Igor Shesterkin signs the mega contract, but you can basically figure out tiers of goaltenders, right? Connor Hellebuyck aside, Connor Hellebuyck took a discount to stay in Winnipeg. Do you agree with me on that? That Connor Hellebuyck could. Okay. So Connor Hellebuyck aside, there's basically tiers. Elite goaltenders, like your Igor Shesterkins, those guys are going to be getting double digits, 10, 11 million, and so on and so on. Guys below that, elite, not top of the line Vezina caliber. Just a step below that, you got your Jeremy Swaymans, your Linus Allmarks, the 88 to 91 overalls in NHL 25. That range. Jake Ottinger's 8.25. That seems to be what they're signing for. And then you go down to the next tier, you see your Mackenzie Blackwoods, your Joey Decords. You're looking at 5 to 7 million. Like, let's be realistic here. If Thatcher Demko hit the open market today, after that injury-riddled season he had, what do you think he's getting on the open market? Because I would argue it's closer to that Joey Decord level than it is the elite goaltender. I don't think anyone would be lining up to give him long-term at $7 million if he doesn't go out and have a healthy season next year. Correct?
100% agree. There's no way in my mind that a team would give him both the cap hit and the term. There would have to be a sacrifice on one of them.
So now imagine this, Harm. The risk for Demko, if he doesn't sign an extension, because look, the Canucks are going to come to him and they're going to say, hey, this is our chance to get you on a discount. And the risk they're running is that he's not able to finish out that contract. He's going to have to go on LTIR. Obviously, they get some cap relief there, but that's the risk the Canucks are running, right? That's what Jim Rutherford's talking about, is we run the risk of having a goaltender who can't stay healthy. And we've now signed him long-term because he's on an extension. The risk for Thatcher, if he doesn't sign, is he goes out next year and has another injury-riddled campaign. Okay, what did 2 years in a row where you play less than 20 games, 25 games? How many did you play this year? I got to look that up. I should have looked that up. But what do 2 injury-riddled seasons do for you on the open market? 23 games. Where you play less than 25 games, 2 in a row where you don't have, and again, it's multiple injuries. It was multiple injuries this year. What happens if that happens again? All of a sudden, that number is even lower, what you're looking at when he's actually a free agent and has to just go to open market. You're looking at that 1 to 2 year, show me you can stay healthy deal. Like, that is not a position Thatcher wants to be. So that's the risk from his side if he doesn't sign. Now, there's also risk if he does sign, and that was the context that more Rutherford was talking about. He said if there's an extension, there's a risk on both sides. The risk for Demko is if he signs, obviously it's at a discount. The Canucks aren't signing him for $11 million a year. And if you and I agree that were in this Decord level. I did our poll question. We'll get to it later. I did a 5x6, but whatever you want, make it whatever you want. I'm not going to argue with you. If you say 5x7, I'll say, sure, that's still a discount from what he would get if he had a great year. But that's the risk for Thatcher, is you sign that extension, then you play this season in 2025-26. You have a great year, and all of a sudden you'd be in that 9 to 10, probably not more than that on the open market, but you'd be in that range where teams are lining up to pay you that dollar amount, and all of a sudden you've taken less to stay in Vancouver. That's the risk for Demko if he signs, but there's risk if he doesn't sign the contract either, the contract extension that we assume the Canucks are going to give him.
The problem for me is that even the idea of a discount for Demko this summer, it's still a massive bet, right? Given how expensive goalie contracts have become. For instance, you're talking about that Decord Blackwood range. That's still Blackwood signed for 5.25 times 5. Logan Thompson, who has a relatively shallow record of successes as an NHL starter, got 5.85 times 6. So what does Demko, a player who's had a Vezina finalist season, in Blackwood's case too, Blackwood and Decord, all those guys had maybe 1.5 seasons worth of success as a starter, whereas Demko has injury risk, but his camp is probably arguing he's at least been a starter for much longer and has more pedigree than those guys. So does he want 6 times 6? Does he want 7 million times 5? That's still a really significant bet, and it's one that I'd be pretty wary of making if I was the Canucks.
For the Canucks, and the way I look at it, Harm, is, I know it's not as simple as, you can just LTIR him. I know the Canucks wanted to accrue cap space this year. Obviously, it would have been great if they were actually buyers at the deadline. They weren't, so it was kind of all for naught. But I think the upside of Thatcher Demko at 5x6 or 5x7, even if he does return to that Vezina caliber goaltender, because also, let's be honest here. I know he didn't play much, but we saw it for a few stretches, especially the one before his second injury of the year. He had really started to find
sure, but quads, he finished the year with an 889.
Yes, percentage. Because
and of course he was shaking off rust, but that's part of the concern, right? That's yes. You can't say, we saw when he had an 889 this season. Come on.
Okay, yes, but you did see it. You know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
You did see it, right?
Every goaltender has those little mini heaters, though.
Okay, but Demko's also done it for long. We've seen Demko did it the whole year in 23-24.
Sure, but you're specifically talking about this season.
So he shook off rust, and then he was back to that level. Then he got injured again. Then he had to shake off more rust, and then he was back to that level. I don't look at that and say, I'm so scared. Yes, there's risk, but I look at it and say, man, how sharp of a move does that look if you have a Vezina candidate? Like, that's what I think he's going to be. If you have that guy signed for $6 million, you're the envy of the entire league. And also, there's already people in the chat saying, well, you just extended Lankinen. Look at what the Oilers are getting for goaltending in the playoffs. We're going to talk about the playoffs and anyone else. You don't think there'd be a taker for Kevin Lankinen on that? It's not like the Canucks made a massive overpay for Kevin Lankinen. He would have got more on the open market. If you ask me, if Kevin Lankinen hit the market this summer, he'd get more than what he's being paid right now by the Canucks. I don't think you'd have trouble or have to attach an asset to move that contract. I don't think you'd get much back,
but it's still a significant contract, and I don't think he would have gotten much more in free agency.
Sure. What did he get? 4.5?
Or was it
basically
4.5 or 4.75? I need to double check.
Okay, so
it's a five-year,
4.5.
$22.5 million contract.
Not much either way. What I was going to say is Blanken's probably looking at a 5 or 5x5 in free agency. The broader point, though, is that that's not a negative value contract that's massively overpaid for, and they need to attach an asset to ship Kevin Lankinen out of town. And I'm not even saying that they need to do that. I'm just saying they have the option. If you're in the chat and you're saying, I don't want to see the Canucks spend $11 million on goaltending or $12 million on goaltending, keep in mind that Demko still has 1 year left on this contract. So they're going to have a buffer year to see how his body holds up with this new training and with all this other stuff that Jim Rutherford was talking about yesterday. They're going to have a year to look at all of that. So you don't need to make a decision in August about Kevin Lankinen. Oh, we got to trade him. Like, you're going to have a year, it looks like, of Thatcher Demko and Kevin Lankinen. The alternative is that they could just trade Thatcher Demko. Obviously, we've talked about that as well. But in terms of an extension, this is a really interesting one for me because I think there can be some common ground because, as I outlined, there's risk if Thatcher doesn't sign it, and there's risk if he does. And to be honest with you, like, I don't know how big the risk really is for the Canucks. And I know, like I said, it's not as simple as just, oh, you can just put him on LTR. But in a way, you can just put him on LTIR.
No, you can't.
What do you mean?
Okay, what if it's like this season where it's stop and go, stop and go, stop and go? You can't just put the guy on LTIR.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have to keep in mind, you have another player in Filipino that you've committed significant money to who also has a lot of injury uncertainty. We know
all I'm hearing is the Canucks get to trade for a $10 million player. That's all I'm hearing.
It makes it complicated when you have a lot of money tied up into two guys who may or may not play for most of the season.
Mm-hmm. It does. And and that's what I'm saying. It's not as simple as just, oh, you can put them on LTIR, but to some extent you can just put them on LTIR. And I know what you're saying, that it could be stop and go like it was this season, but I don't know, man. I really, really do think about it. And I wasn't thinking about it before. I told you on Friday that I was like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. But there's risk for the player. Like, there is reason for Thatcher Demko to want to take a contract that is a significant low ball of what he would get if he turns in a great year next year, which personally I think he's going to. I think he is. I think he has a full offseason to train. I think he was just behind the 8 ball all of last year and just couldn't really get his body ready. And I think he was focusing a lot on that knee, not reporting anything. I think he was focusing a lot on that knee, and maybe that stopped him from preparing properly in all of the other departments of his body, right? Like, I think you're going to see a healthy Thatcher Demko next year. That was me knocking on the wood table that I just built from IKEA. I don't know. I really do think long and hard about it. I really do.
I can see the upside case. I don't think you're crazy for suggesting it, but for me in general, I'm always conservative in betting on goaltenders because I think even in the best scenarios, even with healthy goaltenders, they're so volatile. I mean, I'll give you some examples. Go back and look at the top 6 goaltenders last year by goals saved above expected and how they ended up performing this year, right? So number 1 is Connor Hellebuyck. Okay, great. He's going to win the Vezina again. Great. Year over year consistency. Nice. Jordan Binnington was number 2. He dropped from a 913 to a 900 save percentage. He was mostly average this year. Now he got hot at Four Nations and post Four Nations down the stretch. But in the first half, he was underperforming, well below average. And overall, it's been a middling campaign for him. Jacob Markstrom was 3rd. He dropped to a 900 save percentage this year and was outplayed by Jake Allen at times. Number 4 was Thatcher Demko on that list. We saw what happened to Demko this year. Number 5 was Jeremy Swayman on that list. He signed that big extension, started the season late, and had a disastrous season. He was one of the worst starters in the league. Number 6 was Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who the Sabres, off the back of his success last year, made a significant contract investment to. Now Sabres fans are talking about goaltending as the biggest problem on the team and are viewing UPL's contract as that's a potential anchor contract. Plus, on the flip side, look at some of the top goaltenders this year. I think you would look at Logan Thompson, Anthony Stolarz, who had the best save percentage in the NHL this season, and Darcy Kemper. You would all view those as top 5 goaltenders in the NHL this season. Would you disagree?
No, definitely not.
Okay, Logan Thompson acquired for a 3rd-round pick. Anthony Stolarz signed a cheap contract in free agency. Darcy Kemper was a bad contract that the Caps wanted to get rid of. So it's just goalies are voodoo is kind of what I always come back to. And
are you telling me the cost of goaltenders is about to come down just as fast as it shot up?
I'm not saying it's going to come down just as fast. I'm just saying that goalies are so unpredictable, and you've already made a bet on Lankinen. To me, this would be different if Lankinen wasn't on contract. To me, I understand why the club re-signed Lankinen. It made sense, given that they had really no long-term certainty in net. But Lankinen himself is already a significant risk in my mind anyway. This was his first
Wasn't
year where
great
he's
down
been
the
a 1A
stretch.
starter. I think Langton's an average goaltender. That's fine, but would it shock you if, let's say 2 years from now, we're talking about his contract as it's a bit of an overpayment, don't love that. And so then you're also going to layer the risk of a Demko extension on top of that. I just think it's a lot of money to invest in goal when you have so many needs up front to address. And especially when part of the appeal for building a strong blue line and having Rick Tocchet as a coach and being defensively sound, like, you should be able to insulate your goaltenders to some extent. And so I see the upside case for why you may explore Demko extension this summer. And yeah, there is a scenario where it could end up working out really beautifully. But to me, I'm always in the camp of goalies are voodoo, and especially when you layer in his durability concerns and that that year one of his extension, he'll be 31 years old in December of that first season. It worries me.
We'll see what the chat's saying. We've got this one from Mark. Said, just a reminder, Sergei Bobrovsky is 37 in September. Demko deserves another summer to get back to his best level. I do wonder what a summer of training is going to do for Thatcher Demko, because again, he starts early. Like, he starts really early. Remember that video of him in San Diego on turf with his pads? Just his pads. That was a really, really good video. I do wonder about a full off season for him.
I don't know if you could throw around a comp like Bobrovsky for him, because Bobrovsky's been a durable goaltender over his career. What if Demko is the next Corey Schneider?
Box Van Gogh. It's worth risking it because downside is LTAR, upside is a great AB tandem, and Calcio Storico, I think this is probably the best point. Calcio Storico saying you need to take some gambles when you're in the position that the Canucks are in. One thing that was clear yesterday, Harm, I think Rutherford even used the word we need to get lucky. This team is going to need to get very lucky this offseason and beyond if they want to move away from being a transitioning team to a contending team. Some stuff just has to go right for them. Some stuff they're going to need to take some risks, as Calcio said in the chat. They're going to need to take some risks, and they're going to need to get the best outcomes in those risks. I'm not just saying, oh, it'd be nice. Like, if you want to be a contending team, the way they're positioned, you're going to need some of the cards to fall your way.
Yeah, I mean, that is a fair point. You're also already taking on a huge gamble by presumably keeping Elias Pettersson too, which is, we've been talking about that as it's a big gamble they're probably going to have to take.
And that's one that they need. I'm not using the word they hope they could use. They need Elias Pettersson to work out here. They need it. They need that to happen. Yeah. And Rajcraft with a good point too. Isn't that what turned the Caps around? Taking a ton of risky moves. Hell, even the Kings, you just said Darcy Kemper. Who wanted Darcy Kemper last offseason? Obviously, Kings are a solid defensive team in front of him. But yeah, it is true. You're going to need to take some risks. The Canucks are going to need to take more risks and think more outside the box than most teams, which means it's going to be a really entertaining offseason. I wonder if a Thatcher Demko extension is going to be part of it. You ready to get to the poll question?
Yeah. I'm curious, what's your line for this is too much on a potential Demko extension?
This is interesting because
like, would you do a 6x6? Like, essentially the Logan Thompson? Because that's where I look at it and go, that's a pretty strong no for me.
That's probably my point where I say, nope, probably.
So you're closer to like a 5x5.
5x5, 5x6. I'd be okay getting to 6. But that 6 year 6 years is just where I start to go, okay, like, what, okay, here's the thing. Putting on my Jim Rutherford hat for a second, okay? I'm debating or negotiating with Thatcher Demko about his contract. I lay out what I laid out on this show already, that there is risk if you don't sign this. So no, Thatcher. Yes, you're asking us for 8 years times 8 million or 8 by 7 or whatever you're asking for. That's great. There's risk if you don't sign that, because guess what? If you come into next year and you don't play and you're injured again, guess what you're getting on July 1? It's a fraction of what I'm offering you. And I think that's the mentality that the Canucks have to have. And I know it's negotiating, it's business. They all understand it. But you have to bring that up. You have to say that there is risk if you don't sign this contract. Like a 5x5, if I'm Demko, Harman, that's $25 million. There's a piece of paper that you can sign that guarantees, that's important, guarantees you $25 million this summer. I am signing it. And that's a great discount for the Canucks. But again, 6x6, 6x7, this range, like all of a sudden we're getting into the tier where it's like, okay, well, okay, here it is, Harm. Thatcher Demko comes back, has a great year. Best case scenario year for Demko. Plays, no injuries at all. Best case scenario, okay? No injuries at all. Runner up for the Vezina, because Hellebuck's going to win it again, obviously. Runner up for the Vezina. Tell me, what does Thatcher Demko get on the open market? I don't think it's 10 million. I don't think it's 11 million. I think it might get close to that. I think Thatcher Demko might get 9.5 from a team. But at that point, if Demko has that year in Vancouver, the Canucks still have the option to extend him at that dollar number. They're not gonna lose anything. In my mind, I know Rutherford was talking about the risk about if a deal's signed. In my mind, there's far more risk for Demko to not sign this deal, because if you get hurt that season and you hit July 1, like you're looking at peanuts on the open market. You're looking at a 1 or 2 year deal at what, 5 million like total. All of a sudden you're totally out of the conversation for teams. They might take a flyer on you, but to be in the plans for a team and free agency to be their starting goaltender, you're going to need to play. And there's a chance that Thatcher Demko doesn't play a ton next year. I am obviously wishing for the best for him, but there is that factor as well. So yeah, Harm, I'd say my walkaway is probably around that 6x6 range is probably where I'm at.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. 6x6, I would be like, whoa, that's significant. If the term and cap hit are below 6, then it's still risky, but it at least doesn't sound totally crazy.
Justin Fong in our chat said this: maximum 4 years, rather go higher with the AAV, but lower term. That's an interesting one. I'd say I don't want to go long on the term, but I'd be comfortable with 5 years. Again, I'd say 4 or 5 years. I wouldn't put the max at 4 because I just don't think Demko would sign that. But again, 5 years, 5 million, there's your guaranteed money, even if you're on LTIR, right? So it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one to dive into. I think we did a good job of it. Let's get to our poll question, which I had some trouble with. I posted the first one and said 5x5, right? Would you be happy if the Canucks signed Thatcher Demko to a 5x5 extension this summer? The results were overwhelming. There was a bunch of votes. It was 91% to 9%. 91% of voters said yes. So I bumped it up. I changed it to 5 years at 6 million. These were the results. It is our poll question. It is brought to you by our friends at Pacific Toyota Dealers, who want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X, an SUV packed with plenty of space. The BZ4X can handle any terrain and can take you from the city to the slopes. It's backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota. And if you're driving a BZ4X, you get access to HOV lanes, even if you're driving alone. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives. And now you can finance the 2025 BZ4X from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. Here's the results of our poll question. Would you be happy if the Canucks signed Thatcher Demko to a 5-year by $6 million contract extension this summer? 66.3% say yes, 33.7% say no. Harman, I am putting myself in the camp of yes.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that the results were this strongly in favor of Demko. We know how talented he is, but I thought there would have been more. Like, I've obviously expressed some level of concern and skepticism, and I'm not saying I'd be totally against the idea of exploring an extension, but I thought there would be a little bit more hesitation. But it sounds like the fan base is buying into this idea that he's perhaps turned the corner and that he'll be healthy next year.
That's an interesting one to follow this offseason. I think we could probably do another episode on the other extension eligible players alone, but I wrote about it at Canucks Army. There's 5 players that are going to be eligible for extensions. Wouldn't it be awesome if the Canucks announced a Kiefer Sherwood extension? That would just be so good for business. July 2nd, people aren't thrilled about what you did on free agency. Boom, we just signed Kiefer Sherwood to an extension. What the hell does Kiefer Sherwood get on an extension? There's something you could dive into.
Yeah, I haven't dove into that. I'd be curious, especially with the cap going up.
Yeah,
where exactly he would.
Drew O'Connor at 2x2, like your internal cap. All of a sudden, Kiefer Sherwood's more than that. So
O'Connor was 2.5, right?
Was he 2.5 per year?
I'm gonna double check.
I think you're right, because I did a prediction article and I randomly pulled it out. I randomly pulled out the exact number in my predictions article because people in the chat were like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "I'm just guessing." And then I was right.
You were right, vibes wise.
Vibes, baby.
Nailed
okay.
it.
Before we move on here, I want to remind everybody that we're playing Family Feud tomorrow. Wednesday episode, Family Feud. We're going to do it. So fill out the survey. If you're on podcast, if you're on YouTube, the survey link is in the episode description. We need responses to play Family Feud. We're going to play the feud tomorrow. So make sure you fill out that survey. Programming notes for the week. Wednesday's show, when we play Family Feud, Jeff Patterson's going to join us. He's going to join us tomorrow to break down everything Canuck related. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on right now. And out of this press conference on Monday, there's a lot to talk about. So we're going to dive into some topics with Jeff Patterson tomorrow. And then on Friday, I'm very excited for this, Harm. You watch much lacrosse?
Not really. I go to a couple Warriors games a year, but I don't really watch it on TV, no.
Okay, well, I don't think I've told you this. Friday, Kurt Milosky, the head coach and general manager of the Vancouver Warriors, is going to join the program, and we're going to talk to him about lacrosse, which I also don't know too much about, but I'm going to do my research, and we're going to have a great interview with Kurt. Have you ever, I obviously haven't met Kurt, but have you ever seen him in an interview or anything?
No.
Great guy. Just sends great vibes. And here's the thing about lacrosse players. Not to go off too much, but the sport is still growing. So, and I'm not trying to sewer anybody. I guess I can't. Lacrosse players are very nice. They're not very full of themselves, and they are always willing to work with, the social media people or whatever. And it's normal. Hockey players, not just Canucks. Hockey players are like, oh, do I really have to do this or whatever? I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. Where lacrosse players are just like, yeah, you want me to wear this hat? No problem. You want me to do this? Yeah, no problem. Sounds fun. Let's do it. It's just, anyways, Kurt Milosky going to join the show. There had to be a better way of conveying the message that I tried to get across, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
There's no Philip Ronix on the Warriors. Okay. Let's get to anyone else. Oh, no, before anyone else, I want to tell everybody about Greta, a great spot. No matter what game you want to watch, Greta's got it on. Actually, I don't know if I should say that. Greta's got a lot of games. Baseball games, hockey games. They got the playoffs. Everything is at Greta. They got the arcade. They got the bar. And, of course, they have the iconic street food menu. My personal favorite is the Smash Burger. Head on down to Greta. Make it your spot to chill. It's a great, great place to be. 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. Must be 19 plus. All right. Let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians, who are back on the road this week with 6 games in Everett. They're back at the Nat on Tuesday, April 29th for a homestand versus Hillsborough. You can check out the Nooner at the Nat on Friday, May 2nd, which is a great excuse to get the weekend started just a little early. Check out the White Spot Family Fun Sunday on May 4th, where kids can run the bases postgame. And hey, may the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day at the Nat. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check out CanadiansBaseball.com. My baseball season starts on Saturday.
Great. Okay. Well, one point I wanted to sort of follow up on. I was thinking more about what Culture. I butchered his name.
Kurt Milosky.
No. The
Calcio
Storico. Yeah.
Oh.
I was thinking more about that. You need to take some gambles when you're in the position that the Canucks are in reference to the whole Demko thing.
Mhm.
And one thing that I sort of thought about that's sort of tongue in cheek, but also has some potential legit merit behind it is this idea that, and it pertains to both Pettersson and Demko, where you may as well, like, what if you have the mindset of just screw it, we're going to roll the dice, we're going to take all the risks here, we're going to keep Pettersson, we're going to keep Demko, and if it blows up in our face, who cares, because it probably means Quinn Hughes is leaving anyway, and at that point, whatever, you're going to be a bad team anyway. Does the inefficiency of Pettersson and Demko's contracts really matter that much? You're kind of
That is such
regardless.
a good take. That is such a good take, Harm. I didn't even think about that aspect of it. That, yeah, in all of this, we've forgotten the most important thing, and that's keeping Quinn Hughes in Vancouver. And the best way to do that is by being.
I was like, initially, I sort of understood it, but then I thought more about it, and especially because
that's a good take.
This whole idea around a Demko extension, it's a pretty new phenomenon, right? we're like, I'm still working my way through my thoughts, and that could be a thought process of, well, screw it, push all your chips in, take all the risks, and that doesn't mean trade first round picks recklessly, because because at a certain point, if those picks could end up being like top 5 selections.
Yeah, you're not trading too far down the line.
Yeah. So that's not the point. We're not talking about owner quads trading away 2028 first round picks. But to a certain extent, saying, well, this is what we need in order to turn around, and if it doesn't work, Quinn may leave, and if Quinn leaves, we're rebuilding doomed anyway.
Yeah. Can I tell you this? It is such a good take. It is such a good take. I'm so glad you brought it up, because we've talked about that in the past as well, that it's like every move you make needs to be with the idea of, okay, this is to keep Quinn Hughes in Vancouver. So that first round pick is as good as gone, if you ask me. Trade that first round pick. You're going to need it to go get that center. They're going to get a top 6 center. They said as much yesterday. I'm worried, and I'm just getting this out now. This is like a time capsule. Come back and watch this. I'm worried that if Quinn Hughes leaves, there's going to be, I don't know if it'll be management. I don't know if it'll be segments of the fan base, but like, I don't want to hear, well, you can't rebuild. You have Jonathan Lekkerimäki, or you can't rebuild. You can't rebuild because you have Tom Willander, or you have Elias Pettersson, or you can't rebuild because Philip Hronik's still signed, or whatever. Just insert player here. There's always going to be an excuse of why you can't rebuild. If Quinn Hughes leaves and they butcher this era of Canucks hockey, then it's time. It's time to just say, okay, you know what? Enough of this mushy middle crap. It didn't work. We tried it for over a decade. We need to rip the Band-Aid off and do a proper rebuild where you just acquire a bunch of picks, you build around 1 or 2 guys, and you go from there. I know we're gonna hear it though. You can't rebuild. They have Jonathan Lekkerimäki. So, anyways, wanted to make sure I got that in. Playoff games, Harm. Some playoff games happened. Did you hear? Which one? And weren't we gonna do our playoff picks today? We were. We haven't done that.
Well,
yet.
no. So we were supposed to do those like last week. We were going to do the Saturday show, but then that got moved, and so we were either going to do it Friday or Saturday, and then it kind of fell through the cracks. So we never actually.
Let's do it right now. Pull up your stuff, Jacob. You too.
Sure.
Pull up the bracket.
No graphics to go along with it, but
we're just doing first round. We're just doing first round.
And full disclosure, I'm going with what I did a bracket right before with some of my friends, so I'm just sticking with the same picks.
Actually, that's true. I did one as well, so I can pull up my original one too, so that we're not influenced by the first couple of games.
Full disclosure, I'm just making it up based on what I saw in the first couple games.
That's gonna save you with the Blues. You would have 100% picked the Blues to take down the Jets.
I'm still picking the Blues. What are you?
You
talking
are?
about? Absolutely.
No way.
We ride with our Blues on this show. I picked them to win the cup.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. The moment I realized I shouldn't bet on the Blues is I was working on a Stanley Cup Tiers piece where Chris Johnston and I sort of anonymously polled a bunch of executives, an NHL GM, and got them to rate every playoff team. And every executive rated the Blues as a tier 4 team. There are 5 tiers. Tier 1 being like your Stanley Cup favorites, tier 2 being a strong contender. Tier 4 is sort of like if they get hot, they can win around, but they're not realistically winning the cup. Every single one of the 9 execs rated them in tier 4.
Do you know what we didn't really talk about?
What?
They ran out of gas right before the end of the season. Like they got hot and it was a great story, but they ran out of gas right before the end of the season.
The really salient point that that one exec made to me was, okay, great, the Blues are the hottest team in the NHL right now. You know who else was the hottest team in the NHL last year? The Nashville Predators down the stretch after the whole U2 thing. And I looked it up. They had the best record in the NHL from like a certain, I can't remember the exact point in the calendar, but it was like a 6 to 8-ish week stretch where they had the best record in the NHL. And he said, I didn't buy it with Nashville then. You saw what happened in Nashville now, or back then when they lost to Vancouver in the first round. And I'm not buying it with St. Louis now. They're a good team, but his point was the West is just too deep and too strong that they didn't think the Blues were going to make the Western Conference final. Okay,
let's do our picks.
So here, I think what we'll do is I'll lead you guys through. So I'll go through the series and then I'll ask you guys for your picks and we'll go matchup by matchup so that it's less confusing for the people listening.
Perfect.
Okay, so Western Conference, you have the Winnipeg Jets and St. Louis Blues.
I had Jets in 6.
I had Blues in 7, but I'd like to see the Jets win, but I'll stick with the Blues. Blues in 7, baby.
I had Jets in 7. All right, the Colorado Avalanche taking on the Dallas Stars.
Avs in 7.
Yeah, Avs in 6.
I had Avs in 6 as well. All right, then moving over to the Pacific side, you have the division champion Vegas Golden Knights against the wild card Minnesota Wild.
I had, what did I have? I think I had Knights in 5 or 6. I can't remember.
Give me Knights in 5.
And we'll make it unanimous. Knights in 5 was my pick as well. And then the Los Angeles Kings against the Edmonton Oilers. They had an absolutely insane game 1. But what were your guys' picks before the series started?
I had Kings in 7. And I would have gone. I was originally leaning Oilers, but when I found out Ekholm was going to be out for the series, you add that to the concern I already have about just how healthy and elite McDavid and Draisaitl are going to be, considering both guys are banged up. Like that's what ultimately changed my mind, especially now that Byfield really, really got hot down the stretch, and that also elevated Fiala, giving them a level of just like offensive punch that they haven't had in years past. Plus, I know Kemper wasn't great last game, but he's been better than the goaltending they've had in years past.
He's also better than Stuart Skinner.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to talk about each series as well. But
yeah,
We'll definitely circle back. We'll definitely circle back. And mentioning Skinner, that winning goal with a minute left was something. I had agreement. I was in agreement with Harm. I had the Kings in 7. Also, one more thing on the Oilers. There was all the talk about would the Canucks get a 50-point forward. Other than Draisaitl and McDavid, obviously, who both broke 100. The next highest scoring forward on the Oilers was Nugent Hopkins, who a couple of years ago had 100 points, and he only had 49 this year. So, like, absolutely no forward depth on that team. And you're right, with Ekholm out, Harm, I don't think the Oilers can do it with how good the Kings are on home ice.
Also, Bouchard sucks. We'll talk about that after.
All right, moving over to the East, we'll do the Atlantic first. Battle of Ontario, the Leafs and Sens.
Yeah, I had Leafs in 6.
Sens in 7.
So I had the Leafs in 5, which after watching game 1, I feel pretty confident about. But I'd love to see the Sens bounce back and make a series of it. All right.
I want the Sens to win, but
100%.
And I've made myself, like, I wrongly bet on the Leafs last year against the Bruins, and I paid the price because Quads had picked the Bruins to win, and I should have known never bet on the Leafs in the playoffs. But I don't know. I didn't feel like the Sens were quite up to par to actually knock the Leafs off.
That's what you said about Boston.
All right, now we got the Battle of Florida, Tampa and the Panthers.
Tampa in 7.
I had Florida in 7. That's good. That's just such a bloodbath. I love that. That's good. Yeah. That's good.
Harm, we're in agreement again. I also had Tampa in 7. It seems like we have a very similar bracket so far.
Are you writing this down, Jacob?
Well, Harmon's is basically exactly the same as mine.
Okay.
I'll go back and listen to it. And
I just need to be able to gloat or never talk about it again.
Yeah, probably the latter. All right, now the final matchups here out of the Metro Division. You got the Metro Division champion Washington Capitals and my Montreal Canadiens.
I had Caps in 5.
Habs in 7.
Okay, so this is where I differ from Harm. I had to take the Habs in 7. Of course, I wasn't going to bet against them. And you know what? That was actually a really good game one between the two teams.
Yeah, it was.
We could talk about it. I feel a little bit, even though the Caps won, I feel a little bit nervous about having picked the Caps in 5.
Yeah, and you know what, though? I think the one thing will be, can Montembeault keep that level of play up? Because Logan Thompson's going to be solid, and he looked really good coming back off of injury. If Montembeault can stay at that level, I think it's a tight series and a toss-up. If Montembeault slips to kind of where he was in the middle of the season, he was really good at the start, had a really rough middle, and then was good after the Four Nations. So whichever Montembeault you get will really be how far the Habs can take that series. I'm
sure you said his name properly, but I heard Montembeault, which I think is a really funny nickname
Montembeault.
for him. Montembeault, if he sucks.
Yeah.
Montembeault, back at it again, 5 goals against. Okay, what's the last? We have one more series. It's Devils, Canes, right?
Devils and Canes, yeah.
Yeah, Canes in 5. Devils are so cooked. They should trade both Hughes brothers to the Canucks.
Yeah, I had Canes in 6, but after all those injuries that New Jersey had, I think it could even be a sweep at this point. And did you guys? Just the last thing with that series, did you guys see when Markstrom slashed Cody Glass by mistake? That was the most insane thing I've ever seen. Most
casual Jacob Markstrom crash out of all time.
Yeah, just he's winding up to two-hand an opponent and catches his own teammate and sends him off for the rest of the game with an injury. Just unbelievable.
Also, I know
that.
Cody Glass decently. I've had multiple conversations with him before or over the years, a couple interviews. He is the nicest guy ever. It could not have happened to a nicer guy on the Devils. So that just made it that much more, I don't want to say funny, but it just...
You can say it's funny. It's hilarious. It's classic physical comedy. Is he okay? He didn't break a rib, right? He's okay? He's back tonight?
I think he's day-to-day. I don't know if he's playing.
All right. It's not as funny.
I know it sounds like Dylan is out. Luke Hughes, I think, is
Luke
game
Hughes
time
is
decision. Or
trade related.
Oh, trade related.
All right. Well, hopefully Cody Glass gets better. I was hoping he was just winded because that would have been hilarious. But yeah, hopefully he's okay. Okay. We got to talk about last night's game. The hockey's great. We knew that was going to be the case. I cannot wait to plant my butt on that couch and watch more hockey tonight. The playoff hockey has been so good. It was so good last night. The Kings and Oilers, was it 5-1 or 5-2? What did it get down to? I was watching as
4-0 and then 5-2.
Okay. So 5-2. It looks like the Kings are just in control. Oilers are coming back. It really looked like the Kings were in control from the start because it was 3-0, then it was 4-0. The Kings just looked like they were going to put the pedal down and take down the Oilers. The Oilers stormed back, which I think there's a couple ways to look at this, because I think if you asked me before the series, well, who's going to win this series? I'd say, well, if the Kings win a game 6-5 or 7-6, if the Kings win a high scoring game, which is the Oilers game, not the Kings game, if they win one of those, they're going to win the series. But I think the manner in which they won this one makes me think, okay, the Oilers managed to put up that many goals on the defensively sound and responsible Kings that are supposed to be so good at holding on to leads and playing these low event games. The Kings had no answer for the Oilers storming back from that kind of deficit. I know I picked the Kings and I'll stand by that, but I don't think that theory that I just laid out that, if the Kings win a high scoring game in the series, they'll win the series. I don't think that tracks anymore, because the way in which they had to win that game, at the end of the day, Stuart Skinner's in that for the Oilers. So I still think the Kings are going to pull it off, but this is a great series and it was a great game last night.
Yeah, I didn't love to see the Oilers storming back, especially because they scored 5 and the power play didn't even get on the board. Now what happens if the power play, which has torched the Kings historically over the last 3 years, despite LA's PK consistently ranking among the NHL's elite, what happens if that gets going too? The Kings also themselves got 2 power play goals. So I don't know if the Kings are... I shouldn't even say I don't know. I don't think the Kings are going to have a 2-0 lead on special teams in every game in the series. I would have liked to see the Kings sort of have
Be
more
more
decisive
convincing.
control of the game at 5-5.
Yeah, be more convincing. Win
I
that
don't
game
think-
convincingly.
I'd put it this way. I don't think dominating the Oilers on special teams is going to be a sustainable recipe for winning all the games in the series.
Absolutely. Scoring on Stuart Skinner is not going to be hard, but you're right. You're absolutely correct. Evan Bouchard was horrible. He was directly responsible for at least two. Might have disagreements with the third, but and I'm not even saying this like, oh, screw the Oilers. I feel bad for Oilers fans as well. I'm buds with a lot of Oilers fans, as you know, our pals at Oilers Nation. Like Evan Bouchard is just not a top defenseman. He's just not. He needs to have a good partner with him, and he doesn't have that right now. And I like Jake Waldman as well. Maybe Evan Bouchard is the problem. Actually, let's just say that Evan Bouchard sucks. It was really bad yesterday. Really bad game for him. Did you see the pizza he threw up the middle? Lucas Spiza looks at that and goes, "Oh my gosh, man, boards and out."
I don't think there's a bigger disparity between a player's analytics and the eye test as far as the defensive side. And again, I had this conversation when discussing the Oilers for part of the Cup tiers with one exec who, in context, this exec is pretty numbers friendly in general. He's not this like dinosaur that doesn't believe in analytics, but he literally said, throw the analytics out with Bouchard. I don't know if I've seen, he is straight up one of the worst defensive defensemen I've seen in the NHL. And this is where I consistently see, for instance, Bouchard, even this year, ranked top 5 among defensemen, according to Dom's model, in terms of just his overall value. And I just didn't buy that at all. To me, Bouchard, you know, when you used to mock Garland 2-3 years ago and call him an analytics Gretzky?
Yeah, analytics Gretzky. Oh, I forgot about
Bouchard
that.
is the real analytics Gretzky. He's a good player, but he's not this Norris caliber defenseman that the numbers usually portray him to be.
Dude, analytics Gretzky is one of the funniest
That's
nicknames. That
so
is funny. I forgot about that.
That's elite, man. I got to give you your props for
Gretzky.
that. That is so good.
I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. I think someone else came up with that on Twitter, but I'm not sure. Analytics Gretzky. That's so good. Did you see this? JC Miller's trying to qualify for the US Open again.
Yeah.
Nobody likes missing the playoffs more than JT Miller because he gets to go qualify for the US Open. I hope he does it. I think that'd be so fun. That'd be so great. Okay. Is there anything else that we needed to get to? I think
Lou Lamoriello fired.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Lou Lamoriello gone. So my Horvat Barzal thing is gonna happen. Here's the thing, Harm, and this will be a really interesting one because we don't talk much about the ownership of the Islanders. But when a new GM comes in, like, is this guy going to come in and be like, "Oh yeah, I think we can turn this around and be competitive next season," or is he going to say, "We need to stop being mushy middle. Like, we can flip this guy. We can rebuild quickly. We like some of our young players. We're going to do a proper rebuild. We're going to get rid of a guy like Bo Horvat." Canucks looking for a top 6. You go get a couple pieces for Bo Horvat. You go Matt Barzal, whoever, right? It's going to be interesting to see if the new GM comes in and is like, "Yep, we're going to compete next year," because then you obviously go, okay, like that's what ownership wants. That's not just what Lou Lamoriello wanted. That's what ownership wants. I'm really curious to see. They haven't announced who the new hire is, right? Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see who comes in to replace Lou Lamoriello. But I do look at that as a litmus test of like, all right, what's really going on in New York here?
Definitely. I'm curious to see what direction they take, and if they do go down the road of some sort of retool, I would imagine that I still don't think Barzal would realistically be available. If you retool,
he's still in that
your
age
best
range,
forward,
right?
and he's in that age range that you still build around the guy. I would wonder a little bit about Dobson because the contract situation, him coming off a bit of a down year. He's still in that age range where you could absolutely build around him, and I think that's what I would do if I was the Islanders. But if they look at his next deal and go, we don't think he's going to be worth his next contract, and we don't truly buy him as an upper echelon number 1 defenseman, then maybe he's a player that they legitimately listen on. One thing we haven't mentioned in the Bo conversation, by the way, he has a no trade clause.
Oh, you don't
like
think
a full
he
no
waived to go
trade
to
clause?
Vancouver?
Do you think, with the way it ended here and the way that I don't think he was thrilled with the way management treated him.
Dude, you heard Jim Rutherford talk yesterday. One personal phone call from Jim Rutherford mends that relationship. Guarantee it.
Maybe. But sometimes hard feelings are tough to repair.
Loved the city though. And I think the city would welcome Bo back with open arms. I know some of this market is against him, but especially after the better than Vancouver comment, not a great one from Bo, not gonna lie, but I think he'd be welcome back. And I think okay, here's the other thing though. Like, how long did we talk about Bo Horvat being miscast as a top 6 center? We were like, oh, he's probably better off as like a 2C who can play on your power play. If Pettersson doesn't come back as a top line center, you're gonna put Bo in that spot. All of a sudden, you're just. Although I want to stop having that as part of the conversation, because no matter what happens, they need Pettersson to be that 1C. If he can't be that 1C, they're cooked. Okay,
definitely.
Okay, so you agree? Horvat to Vancouver.
Oh, do not want to co-sign that though.
Anything else?
This is I keep going back to I think the best analogy somebody said was it's like going back to your ex.
With Horvat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, just, we last week we talked about how we're in the breakup stage with Brock Besser, haven't
Bring
spoken
him back
for a while.
too.
Now it's like, oh, well, hey, we need to talk. Well, that talk doesn't go so well. So now you try and get back with your ex-Bo Horvat.
Yeah, just casually throw in the happy birthday text after not having talked for like 2 years.
You know what? Me personally, I've never gotten back with an ex, but one of my friends did, and they're getting married.
Yeah, I'm happy for your friend, legitimately, but I would guess that that's the exception to the general rule of thumb.
All right, fair enough. Okay, let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365.
Before you start, I'm officially putting the ban on you betting on the Montreal Canadiens anymore. I won't. Just had to get that out there.
They're favorites tomorrow, though. We'll see tomorrow's show. Okay. We're going with the Florida Panthers to take game 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Panthers are underdogs right now. You can get them at minus. Oh, actually, no, I'm not taking that. Sorry. I'm taking a bigger bet. I'm taking the Ottawa Senators to take game 2 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Linus Ullmark's going to come back. You heard that song? Did you hear that song?
That Sen song was terrible.
Whoa.
What? You like it?
Dude, electric guitar.
That was awesome. Awful. That doomed them. That validated my Leafs in 6 pick and actually made me go, I should have gone Leafs in 4.
No. One time
that was awful, dude. That was so bad.
No, man. Those guys are good.
I have a group chat that includes a couple Leafs fans and a Sens fan in it. And the Sens fan was incensed when he saw that song. He's like, that's it. We're done. We're not winning a game.
People are such haters.
I want the Sens to win, but the Sens fan base on Twitter is very insecure.
Yeah, they are.
They definitely have the little brother syndrome where Toronto is always the focus of their attention, even before this playoff series. Meanwhile, the Leafs don't even ever really think about the Sens, unless, of course, they play them in the playoffs. And it's just, I'm not saying I love Leafs fans, but the Sens fans have been, I don't want to say insufferable. That's a little bit too harsh. But they've been a little, and maybe it's only a couple of accounts. I think the Locked On Sens account, for example, I don't know if you've seen that one. They're just always stirring the pot, and it's just not right. Maybe it's only a couple ones. I don't want to paint the entire Sens fan base that way, because I actually do know a couple Ottawa fans that are very reasonable, very friendly. But Sens Twitter, even all the Hot Summer Pierre,
Hot Pierre
Summer narratives back in the day, I just don't love them.
All right. So you can get the Senators money line at plus 140 over on Bet365. All right.
But hey, I like Travis Green, like Adam Gaudette.
Boom.
Matthew
Highmore.
I genuinely want them to win because I'm always a fan of chaos and the Leafs crashing and burning in the playoffs. So I should clarify. I want the Sens to win.
All right, plus 140. You
I'm
want to get in
quads-
on the action? Okay,
I was just gonna say we do. I forgot to mention we do have a new Bet365 ad.
I've
read.
got it. I'm trying to do
okay.
it. You keep
I'm just making
interrupting
sure.
me.
I'm just making sure. Just making sure.
Anything else from either of you before I try this again for a third time? We good?
Yeah.
All right. You want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs? You can do that at Bet365. They've got you from game props, player props, totals, and the money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners, Conn Smythe winner, conference champions, the Stanley Cup champion, and much, much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in on the game, an official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right. Giant Baby takes us out of it. Let's go. An hour and a half till puck drop. Folks, enjoy the weather. We will see you tomorrow. For my co-host Harmon Allen, technical producer Jacob Bazar. My name is David Quadrelli. Thanks so much for this episode of Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.